There we go. All right. So this is going to be ProQuest Part 1. It's part of a 3-part series. We have offered this workshop for several semesters now, but I've recently been added to the ProQuest approver team. And after seeing things from that side of the table and just how intricate, we'll say, that it is, I've reworked the workshop just a little bit from the past. So if you've found our YouTube page, there are old recordings of some of this same material, and most of the pieces will still be present in this series, but I'm breaking it down differently and approaching it a little differently than we have before. So let's get into it. So yes, ProQuest Part 1 tonight will cover just the introduction to the guide, your pagination, margins, and the title page. Part 2 will be the proofing checklist and your table of contents. And then Part 3 will be responding to revisions and then common errors that I've seen from the approver side of things. So you'll get a little bit of a behind the scenes convo there. If you would like, and I don't know, I'm trying to move the Zoom info out of my way so that I can see my full presentation. So, and I think I closed it. Oh no. 1 second. So sorry. There we go. Okay. I was just trying to hide my extra stuff that was in my way. So this QR code will lead you directly to the guide for theses and dissertations. If you haven't gotten this from your program directors or your thesis advisor, please take a moment and grab that and save it, because it is your basically your manual for this entire process. Now, we've tried to make this guide as user-friendly as possible, with the awareness that, it is really tedious and there are a lot of steps. So, it may still feel a bit overwhelming, but it is broken down section by section. And I'm also going to share, in case that QR code isn't working for you, I'm sharing a direct link in the chat. All right. So there are 2 sections to the guide. Section 1 is going to cover all of the preparation procedures. So we've linked every form that needs to be filled out. We've given you details for the process of forming a committee, who has to approve what. And there are some details in there about how to decide whether you want a copyright, as well as details on the printing that you might need to purchase. So I would familiarize yourself with that section, preferably early on in your process. It does sound like some of you are already kind of in the weeds, so that's cool too. That's what section 2 is for. So section 2 of the guide will cover all of the things that we're going to talk about in this workshop series, but in great detail. So if you take a look at it, you'll see that it is broken down section by section. There's first an introduction to each section, followed by kind of a checklist of the formatting. At the very end of the guide, we've also included some links to resources. So some of those are videos that we've created. Some of those are just direct links to Microsoft how-tos, as well as a list of sample theses and dissertations. So you'll notice in the guide, if you read it closely, that we do tell you that it isn't recommended to look to previous theses or dissertations for formatting. And that is typically across the board true. What we've tried to provide is a visual reference of the formatting, but with the addendum that it's possible these guidelines can change year to year. So, but generally speaking, everything in that list was published within the last, so in 2023. So generally speaking, they should be, if not fully correct, close to correct. So if you're looking for just a visual reference for some of the things that maybe we didn't include a screenshot in the guide for, those linked theses and dissertations can give you a quick look. Now, I will say if what you're looking at conflicts with what your approver tells you when it's time to review, always default to what you're being told in that scenario. But we have tried to give you something to look at. Before you get started on your formatting, it's really important that you complete your work in Microsoft Word, and specifically the desktop version, not the web version, and to update your software to the most recent version. As A-State students, you do have access to this software for free, if I'm not mistaken. And so updating, barring, space on your computer, updating should not be a problem. And that's really to help eliminate some of the problems that we see when you share a document between computers who may be using different platforms and different versions of the software. So everything you can do to kind of eliminate that on the front end, the better. The web version, the reason I say desktop over web is because the web version either doesn't have all of the options that you need to customize your settings in the way that ProQuest that we require for the ProQuest publication, or they're just harder to find. So that's my recommendation. You can write in whatever platform you want, but when you're ready to do your formatting for ProQuest, Microsoft Word, desktop version, most up-to-date software. So before you start messing with your overall formatting, check that you have written everything in that document in the exact same font, in the exact same size, with the exception of footnotes and endnotes. So your footnotes and endnotes may be smaller, or your superscripts if you're using Chicago style citation or APA endnotes. Those things are smaller font, but everything else from your title on your title page down to your section headings and subsection subheadings all should be the same font and the same size. And you're going to want to check that your margins and pagination settings are correct in the Microsoft Word. My biggest recommendation is never to trust your default settings. You're going to want to check everything. The biggest issues that we see and the biggest hangups that writers have in this process is their margins. So I'm going to try to show you how to do that today. So when we get started, this is a list that comes straight from the guide. No matter where you're looking in your document, top to bottom, everything should be 1.25 inches for your left and right margin. So that's a setting that you can set up front. Your bottom margin is always going to be 1 inch. I like to look, and I'm going to open up a Word document and try to share both side by side so I can show you what I'm talking about here.
I think like for me, my biggest problem is like for our dissertation, the margin has to be 2 inches from the top when you're starting your chapter. But then like everything else turns into 2. And so then I select the text below it and put the margin back like to 1. And then it all changes again. And I just don't know how to make it stay, if that makes sense.
This is for you then, what I'm about to show you.
Great. Okay, I'm taking notes. Thank you.
Yes, so this is, and I've got a list here for where those changes happen as well. But let's look at this real quick in Word. So this is just a fake doc. Can everybody see my Word document that's open? Did I share that correctly?
Yes, I can see it.
All right.
Yes.
So when I say fix your margins, you can go to edit and select all, and this is going to select your entire document. You see how that's all highlighted. So the things that can be the same no matter what. I'm going to go to layout. And so I am working on a Mac, disclaimer. I'm working on a Mac. If you have a Microsoft or PC, your settings will be slightly differently located. All of the settings are still available to you. They might just be in a different place. So if you're having trouble finding one of the tools that I list here, you should have a help option somewhere in your software where you can type in the name of that tool and it's going to direct you to it. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to monitor the chat at the same time. If there are any questions, formatting still goes bad. If the thesis is too big, yes. Yep. Yes. Don't stretch your tables to fill space. And I may add tables. That's a good point. I'm going to add tables to part 2, or because that is something we see a lot also. And the margin rules are hard to get working. The table of contents was really mean. Yes, I know. I'm sorry. It definitely is. All right. So if there are questions in the chat that I miss, feel free to stop me and like say, hey, before I move on. But I'll try to keep up with that. So you're going to want to go to layout, wherever that is on your platform, and then margins, and always hit custom and dialog box. All right. So I'm not going to change anything here yet. I just want to illustrate that bottom is always going to be 1, and then left and right are always going to be 1.25. All right. I want this to apply to my whole document. So I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to shift everything over. One way to kind of visually see, and this is something that as an approver we look at, is this ruler. You want to make sure, yeah, got it. You want to make sure that you can see your rulers. If that's not popping up automatically for you, go into your view settings and just check ruler. I can also get to it up here in this view option, right? So that's the margin that I'm talking about. So for the first few sections, your top margin for the first page of it is 2 inches. So I am going to go ahead and go back into my layout, open up my margins, and switch this to a 2-inch for this page. Right. Oops. And you can do it with the little arrows, or you can actually just type in a 2 and it's going to move it. So now I've got my 2-inch here, and that's great. But what you're mentioning, let me see, did I give myself? Yes. All right. So what you're mentioning is that when I do that, it's happening everywhere, right? For every page. So here's what you do. I know that the first page of my chapter needs a 2-inch top margin. The second page needs to revert back to 1 inch. So I'm going to put my cursor after the very last word on the page with the 2-inch top margin. And this is why, so this is another advice based on my experience. You may hear differently from other people, but again, based on my experience and my opinion is that you should not mess with these top margins until you are done writing. When that thing has gone through your thesis committee and been approved, then start messing with these margins, because the reason for that is that if I put what I'm about to show you how to do, what I'm about to show you, if you change this setting and then go in and significantly change the text, that setting is going to move with your text and you're going to end up with wonky margins again. So my recommendation really is not to mess with top margins until you're either finished with, you can do it section by section. So say your program is telling you you're writing chapter 1 this semester, do it chapter by chapter, but just make sure you're at least very close to finish or not going to make any significant additions to that section before you do that top margin. So, okay, with that said, place your cursor on the after the last word on the page with the 2-inch top margin. Okay. And go back into your insert settings. So again, there are different ways to find these settings. So this is one way to get there, insert and break, or same layout, my layout options, and I want this drop down menu for breaks. So I can do a couple of different things here. The one that I prefer to use is this section break next page, because if this one is easy to delete, this one, this continuous section break works as well, but it's difficult to impossible to delete. So I try to do the next page section break first. And then if that doesn't work, as a last resort, I'll do a continuous. So I'm going to insert, make sure it is a section and not a page break. There is a difference. So a section break next page. Now you might be thinking, I've inserted this, I can't see anything, nothing changed. Go back into your view settings and turn on, I'm sorry, I lied. Go back into your home settings, home right here, and turn on your, there's a proper word for it, but you turn on these paragraph markers, essentially is what I call them. So when you turn this view on, you can see every time that a line break has been inserted, or what we just did is a section break. So it's really subtle, but do you see these gray lines here? So I'm going to turn this off and they disappear. I'm going to turn it back on and they reappear. Those gray lines are the section break that we just inserted. All right, so you'll notice, I'll prove it to you, they're not on this page. So that's what that is. So if you're someone who's already done a lot of formatting and you're like racking your brain trying to figure out why something isn't formatted correctly, even though you changed it and you don't see anything and you're like, what's going on? Check this, turn this on and check to see if you have any of these little weird lines anywhere. Because that's a lot of the time the problem that people are having is there's invisible formatting that they don't know where to look for it. So that's if you've already started to do your formatting and things are crazy. All right, so I've inserted this section break, right? Now I'm going to click down in the page below it, the page that I want to be a 1-inch margin. And then I'm going to go back into my layout and I'm going to change my margin. I'm going to go to custom and I'm going to switch this back to a 1. All right. So now I have a 1-inch margin here, but I have a 2-inch margin here. Now, every time I do this, it's going, so I've placed the section break here and I changed the formatting below it. That means that every page after this section break will adhere to that same formatting. So I've started another chapter and I need chapter 1 or chapter 2 to also have a 2-inch top margin on the first page. Then I have to go in here on the previous page and insert another break. And so I'll show you this way too, because it's the exact same thing. It's just in a different place. Section break, next page. So I've got my section break, but this time it's gonna give me a fit and insert an extra space that I didn't want. So I'm going to backspace that out until it's not there anymore.
So that's the problem I would have is I would get, like, I finished my chapter, I would section break, then there's a blank page, and then I can't get rid of the blank page.
Yeah. So I have seen this on a few people and sometimes it's ticky and I can't tell you, I don't know why. I mean, I don't have an explanation for why this happens sometimes and not others. Hang on just one second. My dog is being restless and he's distracting me. Sorry. Just had to give a good sit command. So I don't really know why this happens sometimes and not others. Oh no, I love the questions. This is exactly what we're here for. So basically when this happens, sometimes it's ticky and you can't see it like you should be able to. you need to hit enter and create space between the break and the text that you don't want to delete, and put in some nonsense letters so that you can see the break, right? That way it's more visible and you can kind of see what you're working with. And just try to highlight. So I'm going to undo so you can see that again. So rather than just hitting your backspace button or your enter button or whatever you're doing, make this section break more visible so you know where you are, and then highlight this paragraph marker or this editing marker. It's called a pick something. I'm losing my words, but there's a word for it. So highlight it and delete it with the delete button. So give that a try. And if that doesn't work for you, we can make an appointment with the Writing Center and we'll work with you one-on-one. But normally that does it.
Did you see Natalie's question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe not, Natalie. I apologize. I think you mentioned, but will this recording? Yes, it absolutely will. Sorry about that. It will be available. It may take me a day or two to make sure that the transcript, what am I saying? That the words on the screen are correct so that we can get a visual impairment accessibility as well. So it may take me a couple of days to check that, but when it's done, it will be up on our YouTube page. So to give you an explanation for what's going on with these section breaks, the way that I, make it logical in my brain is these section breaks are allowing me to create mini documents within my longer document so that formatting, that top margin formatting can be different. So now that I have this section break, I can now change this top margin. I will show you one other thing. This may or may not work. This is another one of those tricks that sometimes it works, excuse me, and sometimes it doesn't. And I don't really have an explanation for why. Sometimes I can insert this section break, and instead of actively changing my margins, which will change it for the entire section after that break, sometimes I can come right here and I can insert space before my line. So under your layout settings, space before, I can enter 72. This is not a random number. 72 points is 1 inch. So I can enter that sometimes and it will bump it. Now, I've worked with students where that trick does not work and I do not know why, but to avoid additional section breaks, right, and the problems that can happen there, you can try this first as well. My point really, and you'll see that only changes it here on this page. It doesn't change it for the whole section the way changing the actual margin does. So my point is that there are multiple ways to get here. If you've found another way that I don't talk about this evening, kudos. I love that for you. But these are the things that I have discovered in years of working with students in this process. So any other questions about margins?
This may not be a margin thing, but on your title page, it tells us that our dissertation title needs to be 1 inch from our name. Can you just highlight the title in your name and put 72 point in there, or is there another way?
I'm so glad you asked. Yes.
So sorry, like this is the little minute things that I'm like, how do I fix this?
Yes, no, absolutely. So again, I have heard other people advise this process differently. And that's great. If it works for you, that's fantastic. This is the way that I do it. And this is, to me, the most direct and easy way. So our title pages, do I have this in tonight's? So we can see it side by side. Yes. All right. So we'll go ahead and jump ahead to the title page since you asked and since we're here. So this is a list exactly what the checklist that your reviewer looks at when you're finalizing everything for ProQuest. So we've already got our 2-inch top margin because we started with it. And we know we've got a 1-inch bottom margin. So now I'll want to select everything on this page and I want to center it, which I think most people know how to do, but let's just go through the whole thing. That's in my home settings and it's here. So I'm going to hit that little, whoop, come on, to center everything. All right, so 1 inch below the title. So here is where things can get tricky, and I want to show you this since we're here. Highlight everything that you're working with on this page and go back to your layout. And I want you to make sure that these, to start with, are both 0. So this is where we run into trouble, is that our default settings sometimes have this extra spacing between lines that we really don't want. So let's take that out and make sure both of these to start with are 0. So we've got nothing extra going on. And I want to look at one other thing, and then I'll look at the chat. I see some things popping up. Go back to home and look at this little tool. This drop-down menu is your line spacing options. And for now, I'm going to set all of this, the line spacing, to single. That way I know for sure that there's no weird built-in formatting before I try to do this weird formatting. Oh, okay. Yes, it will. Ah, you guys are fantastic. Thank you so much for the chat help assist here. So all right, all of our built-in formatting is gone. So I know that so it's clean before I do any of this. All right, I'm centered. My title is now 2 inches below the top margin. Side note, the title does have to be in all caps and not bold. I know that, you know, negates what your APA guide tells you. This has nothing to do with APA. This is ProQuest formatting for publication in ProQuest. All right, so no bold here. All right. I want 1 inch between my title and my name. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing I just did for my chapter 1 or that chapter 2 margin. I'm going to put my cursor either somewhere within my title, or I'm going to highlight my title for my own self-assurance. I'm going to go back to layout and I'm going to put 72 points after. Now I have 1 inch. I don't even have to measure it. I don't have to look at it because I know that there was no space before I started. Something that I see, a mistake that I see often is that people will have either, they'll have double spacing turned on, or they'll have additional space in between lines here already. And so they'll have double spacing turned on, and then they'll either hit enter a couple of times to get you there, which is pretty close, or they'll try to do this trick with my 72 points. And now I've got a bigger gap here than I have here. So again, this is why I just say, make sure everything's clean before you get started. Something else to note, and this is just insider information from me to you. If this space visually looks the same in between your title and in between your name and your university statement, I'm probably not going to measure it to the millimeter, right? If this looks to my eyeballs like 1 inch and is the same below and above, I'm just going to move on to the next thing. So make sure it's exactly the same above and below. Try to do this to get it to be 1 inch. But if you do the enter key and it's exactly the same, then you're fine, honestly. But this is right. This is the correct way to do it. All right. So now let me just take that back away and pause to tell this dog to sit again. All right. So now, because I, went back to single spacing, that extra space is gone. And so this empty space between or above and below my name is the same. Does that fully answer your question?
It does. And like in the guide, like it says this several times, but it says like headings are not bolded. Now, when you're talking about headings like my research questions, are those headed? Like are those bolded? Like research methodology, are those bolded or there is nothing bolded in this thing?
You can bold any of the subheadings you want to bold.
Okay.
But the headings that cannot be bolded are your main section headings. So like the abstract.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and no matter what you've done with your subheadings,
Mm-hmm.
when we build this table of contents, nothing in the table of contents can be bold. So it can be bold
Okay.
down here, but we're just
Okay.
going to want to select all of this and unbold and unitalicize.
Okay. But
With the
inside, it can be bolded and italicized.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
inside the body, we don't touch your APA standards.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of makes sense?
Yes.
With the exception of these section headings. And what I mean by sections is this lovely little list here. So title page, your optional copyright page, your abstract, your optional dedication or acknowledgements, your table of contents, your lists. So let me be clear here too. I've run into this problem once or twice. If you have tables, if you have figures, if you have illustrations, those are 3 separate lists. And so they each need to start their own page and they each need to be formatted according to the layout specified in that section of the guide. Excuse me. But each of these is a new section. If you have multiples, right, you may not have any of them. It's all according to your research project. And then the body, each chapter is a new section. Your appendices is a section and your bibliography is a section. So each of those titles, so that's including, so you'll have, how do I clear, appendices is a good example here. You'll have, let's say, Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C, but each of those also has a title. So Appendix A, permission statement. That title is a part of the heading and should also be all caps, centered, no bold. Any questions there? That
Yeah, I was just trying to write that down because I'm like, okay, I like, and I think I already messed up. I put chapter titles are not bolded. Correct, right?
correct.
Or they
Yeah.
are. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
gosh. Okay.
Yeah, you're good. So everything in this list, those are, they each get a new heading, and each of those headings is not bolded.
There's a little section on the title page that says like pending approval by blah 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 blah. Does that get dragged down to the very bottom of the page? I wasn't seeing in the instructions that note.
Yeah, so I'll finish out this this title page instructions. So you'll have forgive me here for 1 second. I don't have them memorized by heart.
This at the bottom.
Yeah. So you'll do your university statement and degree. All right. The statement is different for the master's and the thesis, but those are detailed in the guide. These two need to be double spaced. In the interest of not creating weird extra space below my degree title, I'm going to do this layout again and do 12 points here. Again, you're welcome to apply double spacing, whatever's easier for you, but I'm going to do 12 points just so I know that that's accurate, right, for my own peace of mind. To get this, so you're approved by your which is your list of committee members. This has to be at the very bottom of the page. And this is a very unsophisticated piece of advice, but the only way I know to do this is to just hit enter. And this is the only time, it hurts my soul to tell you this. This is the only time I will tell you to hit your enter or return key to move something down on the page. So I just hit it until something drops off and then I back up one. Was that what you were asking?
Yes, it was. I think there should be more spaces between the degree and the university and the graduation month, right? That should also
Correct.
be an inch.
Yeah, so you want this to be, and I quote, in the middle of the page. I know that that is unclear, and I'm going to be, hopefully in the next few months, clarifying that with our the people who get paid a lot more than me to make these decisions. But you want this as close to the middle of the page as you can get it. So somewhere you can look at your ruler here and kind of move it down accordingly and try to align it with I think the 4 is generally going to be the middle, but this looks different if you've got a 3-line title, right? So there's no clear measurement here either yet.
It seemed to be indicating, I saw it say 1 inch, I thought.
At one point we had the language to do 2 inches between degree and Arkansas State University, but we were finding that that was sometimes putting it way too low on the page.
And you're saying line it up with 4, so don't move anything above it, but instead of having a full inch there, I could take it down to 3/4 of an inch, and that might be avoid the problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, this is another one of those things that especially if I am your approver, I am looking, is that close? Is it close enough? Great. And I'm going to move on to the next thing. I try my best not to be sending things back for nitpicky reasons. If it's visually close, again, so like if this is the same amount of space, and it's not a hugely different, obviously not an inch, then we're good. If I'm looking at this and it's roughly aligned with that 4, I'm moving on.
So like for my dissertation, like my university statement, and so you see how yours says university statement and then degree is just kind of like that. If mine looks like that, can I leave it alone?
What do you mean if it looks like that?
So like you see where it says university statement?
Uh-huh.
Like that's where the Arkansas State yada yada would go. And
no,
then
let me pull it up so we can
because
get
mine says a dissertation presented by the faculty in partial fulfillment, and then in bold letters it says Doctor of Education, and then mine has that little space there. And I just want to make sure, because that was one of the things my chair was like, hey, make sure this is spaced correctly. But like you said, when I'm looking in the title page, it says, is there a double space between the statement and degree?
Yeah.
But that doesn't look like a double space.
So you can do this. So I manually entered 12 points, which is 12
Okay.
points is the height. If I'm using 12-point font, then 12 points is the height of the space. It may actually be closer to 13, right? But as a reviewer, that's so indiscernible. It's not gonna get sent back to you for that.
Okay.
The other way to do that though, really, is just to be careful to only highlight these 2 lines and just go back to home and apply a double spacing.
Perfect. Okay.
That. Just there. The thing you have to be careful of though, really, and you don't have to worry about it too awful much since this is an imprecise measurement somewhere near the middle, is that if you'll notice, because double spacing is applied, it creates extra space below degree also. So if you're doing that somewhere else in your document and you're like, why is this extra space happening? And it's because this is applying double space to both those lines.
Okay. And then you said 1 inch was 72 points. So when it says 1 inch between the title and the name, that should say 72.
Yes.
Okay.
72 points instead of an inch. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Hang on a sec. I'm so sorry, folks. We're creeping up on my giant dog's dinner time, and he's a little restless. So I keep pausing to gently yell at him. I'm not an animal abuser. I'm not mean, but I am firmly telling him to sit when I mute myself there. Okay. Any other questions about margin or spacing for the title page, formatting for the title page even?
I'm happy with the title page stuff. Are we gonna hit page numbers today or
I
another
was
time?
intending to hit page numbers today, and I think we can cover it pretty quickly. Because so we've already covered the section breaks, which is how we get the ability to switch between Roman numerals and Arabic numerals. So if you'll notice in the guide, you have sections, and I've kind of broken it down here for you a little bit. So this list are sections that have a 2-inch top margin and use Roman numerals for the pagination. So that's going to be your title page, copyright, abstract, dedication, table of contents. Your list of tables and figures. So any of your lists, honestly, that's what this is. Any list should have a 1-inch top margin, but also uses Roman numerals. Everything after that is Arabic numerals. So how do I do that? Well, let me show you. We've already got section breaks in place. So not a page break. What I'm looking for to see if I have section breaks are these, it looks similar, right? It's these double gray lines. So you want it to say, where was our example? You want it to say section break. That way you know that everything that happens in this section is a different formatting from what happens after that. All right. So I'm going to click into I want to make sure it's going to let me do it where I want to. So we're going to pretend like this section is actually my list of tables, and everything above it wants Roman numerals. So I'm going to, if I've already inserted page numbers, I can double click within here and get to my page number settings. If not, I want to open up header and footer or an insert option, which would be up here. So, but because I already have page numbers, I'm going to double click in here, and I'm going to come here to my drop down menu, and I'm going to go to format. So again, if you're on a different platform, I am on a Mac, so this might look a little different, but you should still have the same options. They may just be in different places. So for me, I have to open page number formatting, and immediately I can swap to lowercase Roman numerals. And I don't, because this is the first section, I don't really need to change this at all. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. But I'm also going to, where was that option? Sorry. Let me open that back up real quick, because I also want to center them. Where did you go? Open.
And that was like my biggest problem with my page numbers. I would put center and then it would go to the right. And I'm like, okay, so she's just doing what she wants to do today.
Yeah. You should actually just be able to do this from your home. And the same way you would center any of this other text, right? So what I want to make sure though, also, so I can see this better, I'm going to turn this off so I can see my page numbers. You also want to suppress it on your title page. So technically this is another mistake I see often. Technically your title page should be page 1, you just don't see it. So you do want to make sure that your second page, whether that be your copyright page if you're doing one, or your abstract, is page 2. So, but to suppress it, I need to go back, I need to double click it again and open these settings again. And I'm going to hit different first page. All right. So it's suppressed here, it's invisible, and it's 2 on my second page. Now, another thing that throws people sometimes is you may have created multiple section breaks in here. So maybe your table of contents is 5 pages long, right? And only the first page should have a 2-inch top margin. So you created a section break to achieve that, right? So if you've got a section break, this may revert back to Arabic numerals. It may jump numbers. To fix that, you go right back into those page number settings. And we're being a little slow here, sorry. And you can either continue from previous section if it should be continuous numeration. And if it's being really tricky, you can also move to start at and force it to start wherever you want it to start. I would try to do this first. And if not, go to your start at and manually put it in. But always, if you're seeing that it's switching and where you did not want it to switch, go back in here and check that you may have a new section that you forgot about or don't see. And that's usually the problem. All right, so I've got Roman numerals up here where I want them, but so here we go. This is a great example. So I've got a section break in here and it's bumping to page 7 back to Roman numerals. Well, I don't want Roman numerals here. I still want this to be, I don't want Arabic numerals here. I still want these to be Roman numerals. So I'm just going to pop back in here and I'm going to format them and I'm going to swap it. And it should just continue from previous section and I'm going to hit OK and it should, yay, it's playing nice, right? All right. But here with my chapter 1, pretend this is here, well, for illustration's sake, this is chapter 1. For chapter 1, I do want Arabic numerals, but I want it to start back at page number 1. Ugh, come on. Stop doing this to me. All right. So again, back into my settings. Format page numbers. So let me see if this is going to do the problem. I want it to create a problem so I can show you how to correct it. I can either force it to start at chapter or at page 1, or I can let it continue and it be 9-10. I want it to start at 1. So hit OK. And it should carry over 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes I have seen the odd paper where it's not continuing the numeration. It's either skipping a number or repeating a number. And that's when I've had to go in and force it using that start at, or it's because you've got an extra section break, or it's because you've put in a section break and then moved text and now the section break can't be found. But that is how you typically can fix that problem also.
And that's what I have. So like, let's just say I finish my chapter 1. My chapter 2 will start back at page 1. And I'm like, whoa, what are you doing? So then I'm like, wait, how do I only have 27 pages and I'm at like 168?
Oh,
So
yeah.
can you say that one more time so I can write that down? Because like, this is like every chapter and it's aggravating.
Yeah. So you've got section breaks is what that is. So you just double click to open those settings back up, go down into format, and you want for that specific instance to continue from previous section. And if that doesn't work, then force it. Do start at and then the actual page number.
So like if my previous page was 86, then started at 87.
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason I say like this should be your second option. Try continuous from previous first, because if you do this, then you have to do it for the rest of the paper. This is hopefully going to fix your problem and then it's going to do it itself.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to try it and then it's going to play naughty and then
yeah. I've tried to include a little bit of notes on how to find those settings that we've talked about here. If not, again, you should have a help option in your software that says, oh, wait, I don't know how to find page numbers. So I'm going to type in page numbers to my search bar and it's going to show me where it's at, right? So if you know that a setting exists and you can't find it, just type it into your help and it should kind of pop that up for you. Let me make sure I covered everything I meant to this evening. Yes. Title page. Yep. We covered it all.
Now, does